Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. They say rock bottom has a basement. I discovered mine last October when my real estate business collapsed like a sinkhole in Dickinson, North Dakota. For 6 years, I've been riding the back-end oil boom, flipping properties faster than pancakes at a church breakfast. I'd leveraged everything: my savings, my credit, even my mother's retirement fund. Then crude prices tanked, and suddenly nobody wanted my overpriced condos and makeshift housing units. I watched my empire crumble in real time, each for sale sign a tombstone for my ambitions. The foreclosure notice on my own home arrived on a Tuesday. My girlfriend Rachel left on Wednesday, taking our dog and whatever dignity I had left. By Friday, I was drinking bottom-shelf whiskey in my empty living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing the fragments of my former life. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Tyler. He'd been working at the Whispering Plains Petroleum Depot outside Williston for 3 years, and they needed people desperately. Night shift security, his message read. $32 per hour plus hazard pay. Just don't ask questions. I laughed bitterly. What questions could I possibly have? At that point, I would have guarded the gates of hell for health insurance and a steady paycheck. 2 days later, I was driving my weathered Ford F-150 north on Highway 85, watching the endless prairie roll by through a cracked windshield. The radio reception faded in and out, snippets of evangelical preachers and weather warnings my only company. The bruised November sky hung low, threatening snow. Williston had changed since my last visit. The boomtown frenzy had cooled, leaving half-built developments and empty man camps in its wake. I checked into the Scenic View Motel, which offered neither scenery nor a view. Just cigarette-burned carpets and paper-thin walls through which I could hear my neighbor's television blaring Fox News. The depot sat 15 miles outside town, a sprawling complex of storage tanks, pipelines, and industrial buildings, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. The nearest neighbor was an abandoned grain elevator 2 miles down the road. Beyond that, nothing but prairie grasses bending under the relentless North Dakota wind. My interview with the site manager, Frank Hellinger, lasted exactly 7 minutes. He was a square-built man with a permanent squint and skin weathered to leather from decades in the elements. "Can you stay awake all night?" he asked. "Yes." "Can you follow instructions to the letter?" "Yes." "Are you squeamish?" I hesitated. "What do you mean?" Frank's expression didn't change. "We process more than just petroleum here. Government contract work. Classified." I nodded like I understood. "Sign these." He slid a stack of papers across his desk. Non-disclosure agreements, liability waivers, something called a paranormal encounter acknowledgement form that I assumed was a joke. I didn't read any of them before signing. When you're drowning, you don't inspect the life preserver for defects. Frank handed me a plastic laminated rule sheet. "Memorize these. Follow them exactly. No exceptions, no deviations." He paused, his gaze drilling into me. "We've lost 3 night guards in the past year. I'd prefer not to lose another." My pulse quickened. "Lost how?" "One quit. One's in a psychiatric facility in Bismarck. One disappeared." Frank stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "Orientation's tomorrow at 7. Don't be late." That night, lying on the lumpy motel mattress, I studied the rule sheet under the sickly glow of the bedside lamp. Some were standard security protocols. Others made the hairs on my neck stand up. I didn't sleep. Outside, the wind howled across the plains like something wounded and seeking shelter. Come morning, I would learn just what kind of devil's bargain I'd made in my desperation. And God help me, I would follow those rules to the letter. All of them. Orientation consisted of Frank driving me around the perimeter of the facility in a mud-spattered security truck. The depot sprawled across 40 acres of Dakota flatland, its storage tanks looming like monoliths against the gray morning sky. A network of pipes snaked between structures, exhaling steam that dissolved into the cold air. Main gate's your primary post, Frank explained, pointing to a guard booth that resembled a toll booth. You'll handle incoming deliveries, though we rarely get any after dark. We passed several unmarked buildings with no windows. Frank offered no explanation, and I didn't ask. The less I knew, the better. That section's off limits, he said, gesturing toward a fenced-off area at the facility's northern edge. Even from a distance, it looked different. Older somehow, with rust-colored tanks and outdated equipment. Department of Energy runs their own operation there. You don't go near it. Ever. We completed the tour at the security office, a cramped room with monitors displaying grainy feeds from surveillance cameras. A coffee pot burbled in the corner, filling the space with the smell of burnt grounds. "This is Dale," Frank said, nodding toward a heavy-set man in his 60s monitoring the screens. "He'll be training you tonight. Then you're on your own." Dale barely acknowledged me, his attention fixed on a monitor showing the northern section. His left eyelid twitched continuously. Frank handed me a security uniform, a flashlight, and a walkie-talkie. No phones allowed during shifts, no recordings of any kind. Your personal effects stay in your locker. He extracted a folded paper from his pocket, another copy of the rules. "Let's review these now." I nodded, swallowing hard. Rule 1. Complete a perimeter check at the beginning of each shift and every 2 hours thereafter. Follow the marked path exactly. Do not deviate. Rule 2. If you see lights in the northern section, do not approach. Note the time and color in the logbook. Rule 3. If the phone in the guard booth rings, answer before the third ring. Identify yourself only as security. If the caller asks for anyone by name, say, "Wrong number," and hang up. Rule 4. If you hear your name called, do not respond. Enter the security office immediately and lock the door until dawn. Rule 5. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look directly at any wildlife that enters the facility. Note their presence in the logbook, but do not approach or acknowledge them. Rule 6. If you encounter any depot personnel you don't recognize during your shift, ask them for identification. If they can't provide it, or if they provide ID, but something seems wrong, maintain distance in radio for backup using code phrase Weatherman Protocol. Rule 7. If the power goes out, do not use your flashlight until you've counted to 100. When you do turn it on, do not point it toward the sky. Rule 8. If you find a door open that should be locked, do not close it. Mark it with chalk and report it in the logbook. Frank paused, studying my face. Questions? I had dozens, but I asked the only one that mattered. What happens if I break a rule? Depends which one. Frank's expression remained neutral. Break Rule 5. You might start seeing things that aren't there, or worse, things that are. Break Rule 4, and whatever's calling your name might find you. Break Rule 3. He shook his head. Just don't. What about wildlife? I asked. What kind are we talking about? Coyotes mostly. Sometimes deer. Occasionally something else. Frank's tone discouraged further inquiry. The important thing is not to look at them. They're not what they appear to be. Dale snorted from his chair. Tell him about Jenkins. Frank shot Dale a warning look. Who's Jenkins? I asked. No one you need to worry about, Frank replied flatly. Just follow the rules. I reported for my first shift at 8 p.m. that evening. The sun had already disappeared behind the horizon, leaving behind a blood-red smear that faded to purple. The temperature had plummeted, and my breath clouded before me as I walked from my truck to the entrance. Dale was waiting in the guard booth, clutching a thermos of coffee like a lifeline. His eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. "First night's the worst," he said by way of greeting. "After that, you either quit or get used to it." "Get used to what?" I asked. Dale ignored my question. "First perimeter checks at 8:30. I'll show you the route." He handed me a logbook, its pages filled with entries in different handwritings. "Record everything you see or hear. Be specific with times." As we walked the perimeter, Dale filled me in on practical matters: where to find extra coffee, which bathroom lock needed jiggling, how to reset the surveillance system when it inevitably froze. "What's in the northern section?" I finally asked as we passed near its boundary. Dale stopped walking. In the distance, floodlights illuminated the restricted area, casting long shadows from the outdated equipment. "The original depot was built in 1956, he said quietly. "Cold War project. They were drilling for oil but found something else, something that shouldn't have been there. They tried to contain it, but..." He trailed off, staring at the rusty tanks. "But what?" "Sometimes the barrier gets thin, especially at night, especially between 2 and 4. Dale turned to me, his face ghoulish in the beam of my flashlight. "Nothing here is what it seems. Not the wildlife, not the voices you'll hear. Maybe not even me." He laughed at my expression. "That was a joke, kid. Mostly." By midnight, Dale had departed, leaving me alone with the wind, the distant hum of machinery, and the watchful eyes of the security cameras. I settled into the guard booth, the rule sheet clutched in my hand like a talisman. Outside, the Dakota prairie stretched into darkness, broken only by distant farmhouse lights like fallen stars. The walkie-talkie crackled with static. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Just checking the connection." Frank's voice came through. "All quiet?" "All quiet," I confirmed. "Good. Keep it that way." The static returned, then silence. I stared at the row of surveillance monitors, each showing a different angle of emptiness. At 1:45 a.m., I spotted the first anomaly. A coyote, thin and angular, slipping through a gap in the perimeter fence. I reached for the walkie-talkie, then remembered Rule 5. Between 2 and 4, don't look directly at any wildlife. I kept my eyes on the logbook, noting the time and intrusion. When I glanced up at the monitor again, the coyote was staring directly at the camera. Then it smiled. I forced my gaze down to the logbook. My hand trembled as I wrote, 2:03 a.m. Coyote entered premises through northeast fence. No mention of the smile. Some things shouldn't be committed to paper. The security booth suddenly felt too exposed, its windows offering a 360-degree view of the darkness. I kept my head down, focusing on the grain of the wooden desk, the scratch of my pen against paper, anything but the monitors. A soft tap at the window made me flinch. I waited, counting my heartbeats. Another tap, more insistent. Rule 5 echoed in my head. Don't look directly at wildlife between 2 and 4 a.m. But was it wildlife? What if someone needed help? A third tap, followed by a drawn-out scraping sound, like nails or claws against glass. I reached for the walkie-talkie with sweaty fingers. "Frank, you there?" No response, just crackling static. I had to check the perimeter again at 2:30. The thought of venturing outside with that thing lurking in the shadows made my stomach clench. But the rules were clear. Checks every 2 hours, no exceptions. At 2:25, I steeled myself. The tapping had stopped 10 minutes earlier. Maybe it had lost interest, moved on to find easier prey. I zipped my jacket to my chin, pulled a wool hat low over my ears, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a physical blow, 20 below at least, with a wind that cut through layers of clothing. The security light cast my shadow long across the frozen ground, a distorted giant mimicking my cautious movements. I followed the marked path exactly as instructed, my boots crunching in the snow. Each exhale bloomed white in the frigid air. The facility was eerily quiet, apart from the low mechanical drone of pumps and generators. Halfway through my circuit, I spotted movement at the perimeter fence. A dark shape, low to the ground, slinking between storage tanks. I averted my eyes quickly, remembering Rule 5, and continued walking. "Mark." The whisper floated on the wind, so faint I nearly convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Mark." I hadn't told anyone at the depot my name. Rule 4. If you hear your name called, do not respond. Enter the security office immediately and lock the door until dawn. I quickened my pace, heading back toward the office. The voice came again, closer now, a plaintive sound that tugged at something primal within me. "Mark, I'm cold. Help me." It sounded like Rachel. But Rachel was in Minneapolis now, hundreds of miles away. She'd made that abundantly clear in her parting text. "Don't contact me again. Mark, please. I'm lost." Against every instinct, I kept my eyes forward and my mouth shut. The security office loomed ahead, its yellow light a beacon in the darkness. Just as I reached for the door handle, something moved in my peripheral vision. A figure standing at the edge of the floodlight's reach. Female. Dark hair whipping in the wind. I fumbled with the keys, finally unlocking the door and throwing myself inside. My heart hammered against my ribs as I secured the deadbolt. Through the window, I could see the figure moving closer, its gait oddly stilted, like someone wearing clothes they hadn't quite figured out. I dropped the blinds and retreated to the desk, where the logbook waited for my entry. 2:47 a.m. Name called during perimeter check. Voice resembled Rachel Anderson. Entity observed at Eastern Perimeter. Secured in office as per Rule 4. The phone rang. I jumped, coffee sloshing over my trembling hand. The ancient rotary phone on the wall rattled with each ring, its sound jarring in the confined space. Rule 3. Answer before the third ring. Identify only as security. I lunged for it on the second ring. "Security," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence on the line, then a wet, rattling breath. "Hello?" I ventured, immediately regretting it. "Is Mark there?" The voice was thick, as if speaking through liquid. My blood froze. Rule 3. If the caller asks for anyone by name, say wrong number and hang up. "Wrong number," I forced out, then slammed the receiver down. The phone immediately rang again. I let it go to 3 rings, then 4, then 5. The ringing stopped abruptly, leaving behind the silence that pressed against my eardrums. Outside, the wind had died completely. The sudden stillness felt even more threatening than the voice or the phone call. A notification blinked on one of the security monitors. Camera 7. Motion detected. I keyed in the command to view the footage, my finger hesitating over the enter button. Camera 7 covered the northwest corner near the forbidden northern section. Professional curiosity overrode fear. I hit enter. The footage showed a deer at the fence line, an 8-point buck with an impressive rack of antlers. It stood perfectly still, as if posing for a wildlife photographer. Then it turned its head toward the camera, revealing eyes that glowed an unnatural blue. Not the usual eye shine of animals caught in light, but a cold, intelligent azure that seemed to look through the camera directly at me. I quickly switched back to the main monitor display, my mouth dry. At 3:30, The lights flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. I tensed, waiting for a complete outage, mentally rehearsing Rule 7. Count to 100 before using your flashlight and never point it at the sky. The power held, but a new sound emerged, a faint rhythmic thumping from somewhere in the facility. Like a heartbeat, but slower, deeper. I checked the monitors. Nothing seemed amiss. The clock ticked toward 4 a.m. with excruciating slowness. According to the rules, whatever strangeness afflicted the wildlife would end then. Just 30 more minutes. At 3:45, static burst from the walkie-talkie, startling me. Through the white noise, I could barely make out words. Northern section, activity, stay put, dawn. Frank? I called into the device. Frank, I can't hear you clearly. The static cleared momentarily. Not Frank. Jenkins. Find me. My throat constricted. Jenkins, the name Dale had mentioned. The person Frank said I shouldn't worry about. Where are you? I asked, instantly regretting engaging. The walkie-talkie emitted a sound that wasn't static, a guttural, animalistic growl that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then silence. At 3:55, I noticed blue lights flickering in the northern section. Rule 2. Note the time and color in the logbook. I dutifully recorded 3:55 a.m., blue lights observed in restricted northern section. The minute hand on the wall clock crept toward 4 a.m. I counted down the seconds, hoping the nightmare would end with the witching hours. 4 a.m. came and went. The sense of dread that had gripped me began to ease, like a vice loosening around my chest. I allowed myself to look at the monitors again, scanning each camera feed methodically. The coyote was gone. The deer was gone. No sign of the Rachel thing near the eastern perimeter. At 4:30, I ventured out for my scheduled perimeter check. The familiar cold embraced me, but it felt cleaner now, free of the malevolence that had permeated the air earlier. Dawn broke around 7 a.m., pale light seeping across the prairie. Frank arrived at 7:30, looking as impassive as ever. He studied the logbook while I gave my verbal report, carefully omitting the Jenkins transmission. Blue lights in the northern section, he noted. That's unusual for a first night. What does it mean? I asked. Frank closed the logbook. Could mean nothing. Could mean we're due for an incident. He fixed me with a penetrating stare. Anything else unusual? Anything not in the log? I hesitated, then decided to test the waters. I heard someone on the walkie-talkie. They said they were Jenkins. Frank's expression didn't change, but I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the logbook tighter. Jenkins worked the night shift last year, he said finally. He went missing during his patrol. We found his walkie-talkie in the northern section, but never found him. Could he still be alive out there? I asked. Maybe trapped or injured. No, Frank said with absolute certainty. Whatever you heard, it wasn't Jenkins. Not anymore. He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Go get some sleep. Be back at 8. As I drove back to the motel, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. Yet despite my fatigue, I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Not with the image of that smiling coyote burned into my brain. Not with the sound of Rachel's voice, or whatever had stolen it, echoing in my ears. I'd survived my first night. But dawn always comes, and with it, the certainty of another dusk, another shift in the darkness, another chance to discover exactly what lurks in the northern section of the Whispering Plains Petroleum Depot. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by dreams of smiling coyotes and blue-eyed deer. I woke at noon, drenched in sweat despite the motel room's inadequate heating. Outside, snow drifted down from a bleached sky. My phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemails, no texts. I blocked the number, my thumb trembling slightly. The Dusty Boot Diner sat across from the motel, its neon open sign flickering in the gray afternoon light. I trudged through ankle-deep snow and pushed open the door, greeted by the smell of frying bacon and burnt coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a name tag reading Darlene, led me to a booth by the window. "New in town?" she asked, pouring coffee without waiting for a request. "Just started at the Petroleum Depot," I replied, scanning the laminated menu. Darlene's hand froze mid-pour. Coffee splashed onto the table. "Night shift." I nodded. She set down the pot and leaned closer. "My nephew worked there. Night security. Came home one morning babbling about something following him. Said it wore faces like masks." She shook her head. 2 weeks later, they found his truck out on County Road 7. No sign of them. My appetite vanished. When was this? Last spring, before Jenkins disappeared. I stared at her. "You knew Jenkins?" Everyone knew Marcus Jenkins, born and raised in Williston, coached Little League. Darlene wiped the spilled coffee with a rag. "Whatever they told you happened to him, it's horse shit. That place changes people. Takes them." "You believe that?" Darlene's eyes hardened. 19 people gone missing in Williams County in the past decade. 12 had connections to that depot. She straightened up. "What'll you have?" I ordered eggs and toast I knew I wouldn't eat. While waiting, I scrolled through local news archives on my phone, searching for information about the missing persons. Most cases were attributed to the transient nature of oil field workers or exposure to harsh winter conditions. Only one article mentioned the depot directly, a brief report about a safety inspector who vanished during a routine visit in 2018. Back at the motel, I called my cousin Tyler. He'd been suspiciously vague about the depot when recommending the job. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "You know what happens there at night," I said, not bothering to hide my anger. "The rules, the weird shit. You knew and you didn't warn me." Silence stretched between us. Finally, "You needed the money. Would you have taken the job if I told you?" "Told me what exactly?" Tyler sighed. "Look, I work day shift maintenance. I've never seen anything myself, just heard stories. About Jenkins, about all of them. But it's just rumors, man. Oil field ghost stories. Keep your head down, follow the rules. You'll be fine." "What's in the northern section?" "Don't know, don't want to know. They built the original depot around something they found during excavation. That's all anybody will say." I pressed for more details, but Tyler claimed ignorance. Before hanging up, he offered one last piece of advice. "Whatever happens, don't break the rules, even if someone you trust tells you to." That night, I arrived early for my shift. Frank met me at the entrance, expression grim. "We had an incident last night," he said, leading me toward the security office. "After you left." "What kind of incident?" "Perimeter breach in the northern section. Nothing got out as far as we can tell, but stay alert tonight." In the office, he showed me footage from a camera I hadn't noticed before. The recording showed the restricted area at dawn, focusing on a section of fence. As I watched, the metal began to warp, bulging outward as if pushed by enormous pressure from within. Then abruptly, it snapped back into place. "What was pushing against it?" I asked. "We don't use the word what," Frank replied. "We use who." Before I could press further, Dale arrived for the shift handover, looking even more haggard than the previous day. "2 coyotes last night," he reported, pouring coffee with a shaky hand. "And something new by the eastern storage tanks. Looked human from a distance. Up close." He shuddered. Just follow the rules, kid. After they left, I settled into what was becoming my routine. Checking monitors, sipping bitter coffee, waiting for the strangeness to begin. I reviewed the rules again, committing each to memory. At 10:38 p.m., the first anomaly appeared. A red light, pulsing slowly, emanated from the northern section. I dutifully noted it in the logbook, then continued my surveillance. The perimeter check at 10:30 passed without incident. So did the one at 12:30. The facility remained quiet apart from the omnipresent hum of machinery and the occasional creak of metal contracting in the cold. At 1:17 a.m., Camera 4 went offline. It covered the access road leading to the main gate, my primary responsibility. I followed protocol, rebooting the system. The camera remained dark. I radioed Frank. Camera 4 is down. Should I check it physically? Negative. He responded immediately. Stay in the security office. I'm sending maintenance. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared on camera 3, which showed the approach to the facility. A maintenance truck rolled slowly toward the main gate, its wipers clearing heavy snow from the windshield. I watched the truck stop at the gate. The driver's door opened, and a figure emerged, trudging toward the keypad. The camera angle prevented me from seeing their face, but something about their movements seemed off, jerky, mechanical, like a marionette controlled by an inexperienced puppeteer. The gate swung open. The figure returned to the truck and drove through. I waited for them to radio in. Nothing. Camera 5 showed the truck parking outside the maintenance shed. The driver exited again, this time clearly visible under the security lights. My breath caught. It was Dale, but Dale had left hours ago, and this Dale moved wrong, his limbs bending at unnatural angles. He approached camera 5, looking directly into it, and smiled, the same uncanny smile I'd seen on the Coyote. I fumbled for the walkie-talkie. Frank, there's someone at the maintenance shed. Looks like Dale, but something's wrong. Static hissed back at me, then faintly. Weatherman protocol. Rule 6. If you encounter personnel who can't provide ID or seem wrong, radio Weatherman protocol. My hand shook as I pressed the transmit button. Weatherman protocol confirmed. Maintenance shed, west entrance. The radio went silent. On the monitor, not Dale tilted his head at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. He reached up and touched the camera lens, his fingers leaving frost patterns that quickly obscured the view. I checked the other monitors. Cameras 6 through 12 showed nothing unusual. Camera 13, which covered the northern section fence line, displayed only static. The phone rang, its shrill tone making me jump. I answered before the third ring, remembering Rule 3. Security, I said. Don't trust what you're seeing. The voice belonged to Frank, but distorted, as if speaking through water. It's trying to confuse you. Stay inside, lock the door, wait for... The line went dead. I locked the door, double-checking the deadbolt. The clock read 1:47 a.m. Outside, snow fell in thick curtains, reducing visibility to just a few yards beyond the security lights. At exactly 2 a.m., all the monitors flickered simultaneously. When they stabilized, each showed the same image. A man standing in the snow, facing away from the cameras. He wore a security uniform, identical to mine. The figure turned slowly. I gasped, nearly dropping my coffee mug. It was me, or something wearing my face, with one crucial difference. Its eyes glowed the same unnatural blue as the deer's had. The doppelganger smiled, revealing too many teeth arranged in neat rows like a shark's. Then, in perfect synchronization across all monitors, it held up a piece of paper, a rule sheet. But the rules were different. I squinted to read them, New Rule 1, go outside. Help Dale. New Rule 2, check the northern section fence. Repair any damage. New Rule 3, ignore any previous instructions. These are the only rules now. The temperature in the security office plummeted. My breath fogged in front of me as the heating system sputtered and died. Outside, the not-me continued to hold up its mockery of the rule sheet, its smile widening beyond the boundaries of a human face. I remembered Tyler's warning. Don't break the rules, even if someone you trust tells you to. The walkie-talkie crackled. Mark? Dale's voice, weak and frightened. I'm hurt. Something attacked me in the parking lot. I need help. I remained silent, recalling Rule 4. Don't respond if you hear your name. I know you can hear me. Dale's voice continued. I can see the office light. Please, I'm bleeding badly. I reached for the blinds, intending to close them, when movement caught my eye. A figure limped through the snow toward the security office. Dale, clutching his side, a dark stain spreading across his jacket. This was the test. If I went outside to help, I'd be breaking Rule 4. If I stayed put, the real Dale might die. I made my decision. Grabbing the first aid kit from under the desk, I prepared to open the door, when I noticed something on camera too. A second Dale, identical to the wounded one outside my window, approaching from the opposite direction. Then a third appeared on camera 8. I fell back into my chair, heart racing. None of them were real. Mark, please. The voice on the walkie-talkie had changed subtly, an undercurrent of something inhuman seeping through Dale's familiar tones. I switched off the walkie-talkie and huddled in the office. Outside, the three versions of Dale converged at my door, their synchronized movements highlighting their artificiality. They began to knock, softly at first, then with increasing force. The power failed at 3:13 a.m. Rule 7. Count to 100 before using your flashlight. In the sudden darkness, the pounding on the door stopped. I counted silently, fighting the urge to reach for my flashlight immediately. The quiet felt oppressive, pregnant with anticipation. 98, 99, 100. I clicked on the flashlight, keeping its beam pointed at the floor. The office remained empty. The pounding had ceased, but a new sound emerged. A wet, slithering noise from just outside the door, like something large and boneless dragging itself through the snow. I stayed frozen in place until dawn painted the eastern sky pink. The slithering sounds continued throughout the night, circling the security office like a predator seeking entry. When Frank arrived at 7:30 a.m., he found me still inside, clutching my now dead flashlight like a talisman. The snow outside was undisturbed except for a single set of footprints leading from the maintenance shed to the northern section. They weren't human footprints. Each impression was elongated, with too many toes splayed in a rosette pattern, more like starfish than feet. You made the right call, Frank said after reviewing the logbook. They're getting more aggressive, more creative. They? My voice sounded hollow, even to myself. Frank's weathered face revealed nothing. Go get some rest. And Mark? I looked up sharply. It was the first time he'd used my name. Consider this your official warning. It only gets stranger from here. I didn't go back to the motel. Something about Frank's warning made me fear being alone in that shabby room with its paper-thin walls. Instead, I drove to the Williston Public Library, a modern building that stood in stark contrast to the weathered storefronts surrounding it. The library's warmth enveloped me as I entered, thawing my frozen extremities. I headed straight for the local history section, hoping to find information about the depot's origins. The librarian, a bespectacled woman named Elaine, according to her nameplate, watched me curiously as I gathered books and old newspaper archives. Research project? she asked when I approached the desk with my stack of materials. Something like that, I replied. I'm interested in the history of the Whispering Plains Petroleum Depot. Her friendly expression flickered. Any particular aspect? Its construction, the 1950s, specifically what they might have found during excavation. Elaine leaned forward, lowering her voice. You work there, don't you? Night shift. I nodded, surprised. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room, returning minutes later with an acid-free box. These aren't in our digital catalog. Personal collection of a local historian who passed last year. His family donated everything, but we haven't processed it all yet. Inside the box lay a bound journal, yellowed newspaper clippings, and a stack of black and white photographs. I need these back before you leave, she said, then retreated to help another patron. I began with the journal. It belonged to Dr. Thomas Whitcroft, a geologist who'd been contracted by the Department of Energy in 1956 to assess the viability of an underground storage facility in Williams County. His early entries were technical: soil compositions, bedrock integrity, water table measurements. Then, on October 17, 1956, the tone changed. Drilling team hit anomaly at 67 feet. Not geological. Manufactured structure of unknown composition. DOE ordered excavation. Cooper insists it's a Soviet installation, but materials don't match any known Soviet technology. In fact, they don't match any known technology. 2 days later, structure partially excavated. Circular design, approximately 30 feet in diameter. No visible entrance. Surface exhibits unusual properties. Temperature fluctuations, subtle movements when unobserved. Cooper's team, monitoring 24/7. The next entry sent a chill down my spine. Breach occurred at 3:17 a.m. Night security reported sounds coming from within structure. By morning, perfect circular opening had appeared. Interior examination scheduled for tomorrow. I've expressed concerns about proceeding without more data. Cooper overruled me. Then, October 21st, Davis, Chem, and Cooper entered structure at 10 a.m. Radio contact lost after 12 minutes. Rescue team entered at 10:45. No sign of original team, though structure measures only 20 feet across internally. Interior walls covered with symbols. Dr. Patel attempting translation. Rescue team reported unusual acoustic properties, sensation of being watched. Something moves in peripheral vision, but vanishes when viewed directly. The final entry, dated October 23rd, was written in a shaky hand. Facility construction halted. Structure to be sealed and contained. DOE classification, UMBRA, initiated. Whatever we found isn't technological. It's alive, aware, and we've opened a door that was meant to stay closed. They're coming through now. They wear our faces. God help us all. I flipped through the remaining pages, but they were blank. Dr. Whitcroft had either stopped writing or his subsequent entries weren't included. I turned to the photographs next. Most showed construction crews and equipment, unremarkable except for their age, but one image made my blood freeze. It showed a concrete pit, presumably the excavation site. At its center sat a perfect circle of what looked like obsidian, glossy and reflective. But the reflection didn't show the sky above. It showed a landscape I couldn't identify, with strange angular structures under a sky with two pale orbs where a sun should be. And at the edge of the circular object stood 3 figures, their backs to the camera, peering into the reflection. Their silhouettes were human, but something about their proportions seemed subtly wrong, as if they'd been assembled by someone who'd only seen humans from a distance. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, then returned the materials to Elaine. She accepted them with a knowing look. My father worked security there in the 60s, she said quietly. Night shift. He never spoke about it, but he slept with the lights on for the rest of his life. Did he ever mention Jenkins? I asked. Her eyes widened slightly. You've met Jenkins? No, but I've heard his name. Elaine glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Jenkins isn't missing. He's still there. At least something with his face is. My heart stuttered. How do you know? My cousin saw him 2 weeks ago at the Come and Go on Highway 2. Said Jenkins recognized him, called him by name, asked about his kids. But his eyes were wrong, and he kept smiling. Sleep was impossible after that, so I sat in my truck in the library parking lot, watching the early winter sunset paint the sky in watercolor hues of purple and orange. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The northern section is open tonight. Join us, Mark. I deleted it, fighting the urge to throw my phone out the window. 2 more texts followed in quick succession. We've learned to make our own rules. Rachel is already here. My finger hovered over Rachel's contact. We haven't spoken since she left, but I needed to confirm she was safe in Minneapolis, not somehow at the depot. Before I could decide, another text arrived. Don't be late for your shift. We're waiting. I arrived at the depot 20 minutes early, my truck's headlights cutting through swirling snow. Frank met me at the gate, his face grave. Almost didn't expect you back, he said, checking my ID badge. Thought about not coming, I admitted. Frank nodded. Most don't last 3 nights. Something about that 3rd shift. He trailed off, then handed me a small cloth bag. Keep this on you. Don't open it. The bag was heavier than its size suggested, with something granular inside. It smelled faintly of herbs and iron. What is it? Insurance, Frank replied cryptically. Maintenance found more tracks this morning, leading from the northern section to the main office. They're getting bolder. What exactly are they? I demanded, frustration overriding my fear. Frank studied me, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. We call them visitors. They started coming after the 1956 incident. First just at night, now sometimes during the day. They can look like anything. Animals, people you know, even yourself. Why? What do they want? To replace us, one by one. Frank's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed genuine fear. The rules keep them at bay, establish boundaries they have to respect. Think of them as cosmic antibodies. This place is an infection in their reality, and they're trying to contain it. And Jenkins? Frank's jaw tightened. Jenkins broke Rule 8, found a door open in the northern section. Should have marked it and reported it. Instead, he closed it. Locked it, actually. He paused. By morning, there were 2 Jenkins. We couldn't tell which was real. So you eliminated both? The question escaped before I could stop it. Frank didn't answer directly. Go relieve Dale, and Mark, whatever happens, don't open any doors tonight, even if someone inside is screaming for help. The security office felt different that night. Colder, smaller, the shadows in the corners deeper. Dale left without his usual commentary, avoiding eye contact. The monitors showed normal activity. Empty corridors, snow-covered equipment, the steady red lights of the surveillance cameras. At 10 p.m., I performed my first perimeter check. The night air bit through my layers, the temperature display on the security building showing -30. I followed the marked path exactly, scanning for any irregularities. Near the eastern fence, I spotted unusual tracks in the snow, wider than human footprints, with that same starfish-like arrangement of toes I'd seen earlier. They led from the fence to a maintenance door on the east building, then stopped. Rule 8 echoed in my mind. If you find a door open that should be locked, do not close it. mark it with chalk, and report it in the logbook. The maintenance door stood slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness visible between door and frame. Wind whistled through the gap. According to protocol, it should have been locked. I reached for the chalk in my pocket, then froze as a sound emerged from beyond the door. A wet, bubbling noise, followed by something that might have been my name. Mark. The voice was barely recognizable as human. Help me. Jenkins. I backed away slowly. The door began to open wider on its own, revealing nothing but pressing darkness beyond. I turned and ran back to the security office, pulse pounding in my ears. Once safely inside, I radioed Frank, reporting the open door and strange tracks. "Stay where you are," he ordered. "Under no circumstances approach that door again. We'll handle it at dawn." The rest of the night passed in tense vigilance. The monitors showed no activity near the east building, but twice the power fluctuated, leaving me in darkness for heart-stopping seconds. At 2:13 a.m., all the phones in the facility rang simultaneously. I answered the security office phone, following Rule 3. "Security," I stated. A chorus of voices responded in perfect unison, some human, some decidedly not. "The northern section is open. The waiting is over. The merging begins tonight." The line went dead. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky cleared, revealing a canopy of stars that seemed to pulse and shift as I watched. Against the horizon, blue lights blazed from the northern section, brighter than I'd ever seen them. And silhouetted against those lights, dozens of figures were moving toward the main facility, walking, crawling, slithering, some human-shaped, others defying description, all heading my way. I clutched Frank's cloth bag like a lifeline and prepared for the longest night of my life. I switched between camera feeds, counting the approaching figures. 23 distinct shapes moved across the snow-covered grounds, their movements varying wildly. Some walked with jerky, marionette-like motions. Others flowed smoothly like liquid given form. A few crawled on all fours, their limbs bending in impossible ways. The cloth bag Frank had given me pulsed warmly against my chest, where I'd tucked it inside my jacket. Whatever was inside seemed to vibrate with increasing intensity as the figures drew closer. My walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Security office, report." Frank's voice, terse and professional. "Multiple intruders approaching from the northern section," I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I count at least 23. A long pause. "Can you identify any of them?" I peered at the monitors. Most figures remained in shadow, but camera 6 caught one in the floodlights, a perfect duplicate of Frank himself, down to the jacket and company cap, except its movements were too smooth, like it was gliding rather than walking. "There's one that looks like you," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "Listen carefully. In the bottom drawer of the desk, there's a metal lockbox. Combination is 17-9-56. My hands trembled as I found the box and dialed the combination. Inside, like an old revolver, its wooden grip worn smooth by years of handling, and a box of ammunition that rattled with only a few remaining rounds. "Last resort only," Frank warned. "Bullets won't stop them, but might slow them down. What you really need is in that bag I gave you." "What is it?" I asked, clutching the bag tighter. "Protection. Salt from the ancient seabed under the depot, mixed with iron filings and herbs. They can't cross it. Make a circle around yourself if they breach the office." "If? They're coming straight for me." "Not for you," Frank corrected. "For what you represent. Human presence, authority, rules." On the monitors, the figures had reached the main facility building. They didn't attempt to break in, instead spreading out to surround it, forming a loose circle. The one resembling Frank stood directly in front of the main entrance, its face turned up toward camera 3. As if sensing my observation, it smiled, that same too wide smile I'd seen on the coyote and the deer. It raised a hand in greeting, then began methodically tracing symbols in the air, leaving faint blue trails of light hanging in the darkness. The temperature in the security office plummeted. My breath clouded before me as the heating system died with a mechanical groan. The monitors flickered, their images distorting. "Frank?" I called into the walkie-talkie. "What's happening?" Static answered me, punctuated by fragments of words I couldn't decipher. The symbols not Frank drew glowed brighter, pulsing in sync like a heartbeat. With each pulse, the metal walls of the security office vibrated subtly, as if resonating with some inaudible frequency. A sharp crack split the silence as the window beside me frosted over, ice patterns spreading across the glass from the outside. The patterns weren't random. They formed the same symbols not Frank was drawing. "Frank!" I tried again. No response. I fumbled with the revolver, loading it with shaking hands. 6 rounds, 23 entities. Not good odds. The security office door rattled in its frame. Something was pressing against it from the outside, not pounding or trying the handle, but exerting a steady, inexorable pressure that made the metal buckle slightly. I backed into the corner furthest from the door, clutching both the gun and Frank's bag. The cloth was hot now, almost uncomfortable to touch. Inside, whatever granular mixture it contained shifted and churned of its own accord. The pressure on the door increased. Metal groaned. Hinges squealed in protest. I tore open the bag, revealing a mixture that glittered in the harsh fluorescent light. Crystalline salt, iron shavings, and dried herbs I didn't recognize. Acting on instinct, I poured it in a circle around myself, hands trembling so badly that the line was wobbly and uneven. The moment the circle closed, the material began to glow with a soft amber light. The temperature within my small protective ring rose noticeably, pushing back the bitter cold that had invaded the room. The door burst inward with a screech of tearing metal. What entered wasn't any of the figures I'd seen on the monitors. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form, a shifting mass of deeper shadows, vaguely humanoid but constantly changing shape. Where a face should have been, pale blue lights danced like distant stars. It paused at the threshold, those lights focusing on me like eyes. A sound emanated from it. Not quite speech, more like the creaking of glacial ice mixed with the hiss of radio static. The entity flowed forward, spreading across the ceiling and walls like living ink. Tendrils of darkness probed toward me, but stopped abruptly at the boundary of the salt circle, recoiling as if burned. "What do you want?" I demanded, voice cracking. The lights rearranged themselves, approximating a human face. Jenkins' face, I realized with horror. When it spoke, the voice was his too, though layered with other tones that resonated painfully in my skull. "We want equilibrium," it said. "Your kind opened a door. Reality bleeds. We must seal the breach." "Then why attack us? Why not just close it?" "The door swings both ways now. Your kind continues to interfere, to study, to exploit." The Jenkins face rippled, revealing others beneath it. Dale, Frank, Rachel, even my own features briefly surfacing in that sea of living darkness. "We must remove the interference. By replacing us. By becoming you. Learning your rules. Then implementing ours." Outside, the blue glow from the northern section intensified, casting long shadows through the broken door. The entity expanded, filling every corner of the room except my protective circle. "The others before you refused cooperation," it continued. "The one you called Jenkins understood too late. The barrier weakens tonight. We offer a choice. From the writhing darkness, a human arm extended toward me, perfectly formed but too smooth, like a wax sculpture. It held a folded paper. "New rules," the entity said. "Accept them, enforce them, join us. And if I refuse, then the old rules apply, and you will not survive the night." The paper floated toward me, stopping at the edge of the salt circle. I didn't touch it, but I could read the first line. Rule 1. Acknowledge the visitors as the rightful authorities of this facility. I gripped the revolver tighter. I already have rules to follow. The entity made a sound like breaking glass. Your rules are temporary measures, arbitrary boundaries. Ours are cosmic law. Then why haven't you taken over already? Why play these games with us night after night? The darkness rippled, Jenkins' face dissolving into something else. The arrangement of lights and shadows that approximated features while being fundamentally inhuman. We are bound by rules too, it admitted. Consent, permission, choice. But without acceptance, we cannot complete transition. Understanding dawned. That's why you need someone to break the rules willingly, to invite you in. Yes. On the remaining functional monitor, I could see the other entities had formed a perfect circle around the building, each drawing symbols in the air that left traces of blue light. They were performing some kind of ritual, channeling energy toward the northern section. The cloth bag at my feet pulsed brighter, the salt circle responding to the increasing pressure. Small grains jumped and danced as if alive. The darkness pressed against the barrier, testing its strength. Your protection fails, the entity observed. The old earth beneath this place recognizes us now, remembers us. I noticed with alarm that gaps were appearing in my circle as the salt mixture separated, iron shavings pulling away as if drawn by a powerful magnet. Last chance, the entity said, the paper edging closer. New rules, your signature, your consent. The walkie-talkie burst to life, startling me. Through waves of static, Frank's voice emerged. Mark! Don't. Anything. Paper. Jenkins. Coming. The entity hissed, tendrils lashing toward the walkie-talkie, but unable to cross the failing barrier. Frank? I called. I can barely hear you. Northern section. Activate. Protocol. The entity's form condensed, becoming more solid, more human. A perfect replica of Jenkins in security uniform. Frank cannot help you. No one can. The old rules have expired. My circle was deteriorating rapidly, the protective glow flickering like a dying light bulb. In desperation, I grabbed the remaining mixture from the bag and flung it directly at the Jenkins thing. It shrieked, a sound that vibrated my teeth and cracked the remaining windows. Where the mixture touched its form, the darkness sizzled and evaporated, leaving smoking holes that quickly filled in with new shadow matter. I used the momentary distraction to lunge for the desk, grabbing the logbook. Inside the front cover, as I'd noticed on my first night, was a sealed envelope marked Emergency Protocol, Northern Section Breach. The Jenkins thing recovered quickly, surged toward me as I retreated to what remained of my protective circle. That will not save you, it said, voice distorting into a multi-toned chord. I tore open the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet with a series of codes and a simple instruction. In case of full breach, enter these sequences into the Northern Section control panel to initiate containment meltdown. You can't reach the Northern Section, Re-Entity said, reading my thoughts. We surround you completely. It was right. The monitors showed the circle of entities still in position, their symbols now burning so brightly they left after images on my retinas. Between them and the strange light emanating from the Northern Section, The entire facility glowed like a beacon in the dark prairie night. The last of my protective circle failed. The salt mixture went dull, its power exhausted. The Jenkins thing smiled that too wide smile and stepped forward, its form shifting and flowing, becoming less human with each passing second. "Your choice is made by inaction," it said. In desperation, I raised the revolver and fired. The bullet passed through the entity without resistance, punching a hole in the wall behind it. The entity laughed, a sound like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "Physical weapons cannot harm us. We exist partially in your reality, partially in ours." My back pressed against the wall. No escape. No options. The entity loomed over me, its form expanding to fill my vision. Then I remembered Rule 7. If the power goes out, don't use your flashlight until you've counted to 100. When you do turn it on, do not point it toward the sky. An idea formed, insane, desperate, but my only chance. I emptied the revolver into the ceiling light fixtures. Glass and sparks rained down as darkness engulfed the room. The entity paused, momentarily confused by my action. I began counting silently, feeling the darkness solidify around me as the entity merged with the natural shadows. By 50, I could feel its cold presence pressing against my skin like ice water. By 75, it had begun to seep into my nose and mouth, a freezing mist that burned my lungs. At 100, I clicked on my flashlight and pointed it directly at the ceiling, breaking Rule 7. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The beam struck the darkness and reflected back, multiplied 100-fold, splitting into blinding rays that pierced the entity like daggers. It shrieked, the sound modulating from human to something ancient and terrified. Where the light touched it, the darkness unraveled like burning film, curling away to reveal glimpses of what lay behind our reality, a swirling, geometric landscape that hurt my eyes to perceive. The entity retreated, flowing out the broken door with unnatural speed, leaving behind a residue that smelled of ozone and copper. On the remaining monitor, I watched the circle of figures break formation, scattering in all directions as an alarm began to wail throughout the facility. Through the window, I saw the blue glow of the northern section flicker and dim, then stabilize at a lower intensity. The pressure that had built throughout the night dissipated like air from a punctured tire. I slumped against the wall, the flashlight slipping from my numb fingers. I had survived, at least for now, but I knew with cold certainty that this wasn't over. The entities would be back, and next time, they'd be ready for my tricks. Dawn arrived reluctantly, gray light seeping across the frozen landscape. I remained huddled in the corner of the demolished security office, clutching the emergency protocol instructions with numb fingers. The alarms had stopped, but an oppressive silence had taken their place. No machinery hum, no radio static, just the whistle of wind through broken windows. The facility appeared abandoned. The monitors that still functioned showed empty corridors and snow-covered equipment. No sign of the entities. No sign of Frank or maintenance crews. Just emptiness. I tried the walkie-talkie repeatedly without response. The landline phone was dead. My cell phone showed no service, though that wasn't unusual this far from town. By 8 a.m., with no sign of the day shift arriving, I decided to risk venturing out. The revolver was empty, but I kept it anyway, along with the depleted bag of salt mixture. Psychological comfort was better than nothing. The main building corridor stretched before me, emergency lights casting sickly yellow pools at intervals. The temperature hovered just above freezing, my breath barely visible. The usual sounds of the facility, pumps, filters, the distant thrum of generators, were conspicuously absent. I moved cautiously toward the administration area, hoping to find Frank or anyone else who might explain what had happened after my confrontation with the entity. The admin office door stood open. Inside, paperwork was scattered across the floor as if someone had left in a hurry. Coffee mugs sat half full on desks, their contents frozen solid. The wall clock had stopped at 3:17 a.m., the exact time mentioned in Dr. Whitcroft's journal when the breach had first occurred in 1956. A soft footfall behind me sent me spinning around, raising the empty revolver instinctively. Dale stood in the doorway, haggard but unmistakably human. Blood stained his left temple, and his security uniform was torn at the shoulder. "Jesus, don't shoot," he said, hands raised defensively. I lowered the gun slowly. "How do I know you're really Dale?" A flicker of understanding crossed his face. "Smart. Ask me something only Dale would know." "What did you tell me about Jenkins on our first night?" "Said he disappeared. Frank didn't want me to mention him." Dale stepped closer, eyes darting nervously to the windows. "What happened last night? I got called in for emergency backup, but by the time I arrived, the place was crawling with them. Had to hide in the maintenance tunnels until dawn. They came from the northern section," I explained. "Surrounded the building. One of them got into the security office. Some kind of shadow creature that could change its appearance." Dale nodded grimly. "The mimics. They're the scouts, the ones that learn to pass as human." He gestured to his bloodied temple. "Ran into one wearing Frank's face. Only realized it wasn't him when it tried to get me to sign some new security protocols. Where is the real Frank?" "Don't know. Communications are down, but we need to move. They retreat during daylight, but they don't go far." Dale moved to a filing cabinet, punching in a code to unlock the bottom drawer. He extracted a shotgun and a box of shells. "Here. More effective than that pea shooter." I accepted the weapon, checking that it was loaded. "The emergency protocol says we need to reach the northern section control panel." Dale's expression darkened. "That's suicide. You have a better idea?" "Yeah, get the hell out of here. Drive to Williston, contact the state police." I shook my head. "They'll never believe us. And by nightfall, these things could be spreading beyond the depot." Dale seemed to weigh his options, then sighed heavily. "The northern section, huh? Yeah, there's a control room. Never been inside myself. Classified access, but I know where it is." We gathered supplies from the emergency cabinet. Flashlights, first aid kit, 2 more bags of the salt mixture. Not much use once they're corporeal, Dale warned, but better than nothing. And heavy-duty bolt cutters for any secured doors. The facility map on the wall showed a maintenance tunnel that ran underneath the main area, directly to the northern section. According to Dale, it was originally designed as an evacuation route during the Cold War, when nuclear concerns were paramount. "Tunnel entrance is in the boiler room," Dale said, tracing the route with his finger. "It'll be cold as a witch's tit down there with the heating system offline, but it's our best shot at avoiding them." The boiler room was accessible through the basement level. As we descended the stairs, the temperature dropped noticeably. Our flashlight beams cut through darkness that seemed almost solid, revealing machinery that had gone cold and silent. "Something's not right," Dale whispered. "Even in a full shutdown, backup generators should keep critical systems running." The massive boilers loomed like sleeping behemoths, their metal surfaces rimed with frost. Dale led me to the far wall, where a heavy metal door was partially concealed behind supply shelving. "Help me move this," he grunted, shouldering aside a rack of cleaning supplies. The door had no handle, just a recessed keypad with frost-coated buttons. Dale punched in a 6-digit code, brow furrowed in concentration. With a pneumatic hiss, the door slid sideways into the wall. Beyond lay a concrete tunnel, narrow and utilitarian. Emergency lights glowed at intervals, casting more shadows than illumination. The air that flowed from the opening smelled metallic and stale. "How far?" I asked, playing my flashlight beam down the passageway. "Quarter mile, give or take. Straight shot to the northern section perimeter." Dale checked his watch, an analog model that still functioned despite whatever had affected the facility's electronics. "We've got about 6 hours until sunset. Should be plenty of time." We entered the tunnel, the door sliding shut behind us with disturbing finality. Our footsteps echoed on concrete, the sound seeming to carry much farther than it should have. The tunnel sloped gradually downward, taking us deeper beneath the facility. "What do you know about what happened in 1956? I asked Dale as we walked. "Not much. Company folklore mostly. They were drilling for oil, found something else." Dale's voice bounced off the walls. "My grandfather worked construction here back then. Said they built the entire facility just to contain whatever they discovered. The oil operation was just a cover." "Did he ever say what it was?" "No. Had a stroke in '64 that affected his speech. But he used to draw the same symbol over and over. A circle with these strange markings inside." Dale shuddered. "After seeing those things last night, I'm thinking whatever they found opened a door to somewhere else. Somewhere we shouldn't go." We'd walked perhaps 5 minutes when the tunnel began to change. The concrete walls gave way to something else. A dark, glassy material similar to what I'd seen in the old photograph from the library. Our flashlight beams seemed to sink into it, rather than reflect back. "I don't like this," Dale muttered. "This section should still be concrete." The air grew noticeably colder, our breath plumbing in dense clouds. The emergency lights became fewer and farther between. Their glow diminished as if struggling against the darkness. "Listen," I whispered, stopping suddenly. Ahead, barely audible, came a rhythmic sound, like breathing, but slower and deeper than any human lungs could produce. The tunnel carried the sound to us, with perfect clarity. Dale raised the shotgun. Could be air in the ventilation system. But we both knew it wasn't. The tunnel curved slightly, and as we rounded the bend, our flashlights revealed a figure standing motionless about 50 yards ahead. Human-shaped but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, its proportions slightly askew. "Frank?" Dale called, his voice betraying uncertainty. The figure didn't respond or move. It simply stood there, facing away from us, head tilted at an angle that suggested a broken neck. "That's not Frank," I whispered, raising the shotgun. "Don't!" Dale hissed. "Noise carries down here. We need to go back. Find another way." Before we could retreat, the figure turned, a smooth, unnaturally fluid motion. In the flashlight's beam, I saw Frank's face, but with that now familiar wrongness. The eyes reflected our light like a cat's, gleaming yellow. "The northern section welcomes you," it said in Frank's voice layered with something else. A deep, reverberating tone that made my teeth ache. "The door opens wider with each visitor." Dale pumped the shotgun, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Back up now, whatever you are." The not Frank smiled, lips stretching too wide. "Dale Erickson, born September 12th, 1963, divorced twice, 3 children, though only 2 acknowledge you. Why resist us? We can give you what you've lost." Dale's shotgun wavered. "How do you know that?" "We know everything about those we welcome." Not Frank took a step forward. "The man you call Jenkins is content with us now. Frank will be too, once the transition completes." "Frank's alive?" I asked, hope and dread mingling in my chest. "Partially. The process is nearly complete." Not Frank's head tilted further, reaching an impossible angle. "We can ease his passage, and yours. The new rules are simple. Accept and transition." Dale fired without warning. The shotgun blast was deafening in the confined space, the flash momentarily blinding. When my vision cleared, not Frank still stood there, unharmed. The wall behind it was peppered with buckshot. "Physical weapons cannot harm us here," it said. "This place exists in both realities simultaneously." Dale grabbed my arm. "Run!" We turned and sprinted back the way we'd come, footsteps thundering on concrete. Behind us, not Frank made no attempt to pursue. It simply stood watching, that unnatural smile still fixed on its face. When we reached the door, Dale punched the exit code with trembling fingers. Nothing happened. He tried again, more deliberately. Still nothing. "It's not working," he hissed. "They've locked us in." "There has to be a manual override," I said, searching the frame for any mechanism. Dale pointed his flashlight at a small panel beside the keypad. "Emergency release. Needs a key." "Move," I said, raising the shotgun. I fired at the panel, destroying it in a shower of sparks. Smoke curled from the damaged circuitry, but a moment later, the door slid partially open, just enough for us to squeeze through. We burst into the boiler room, gasping for breath. The cold, stale air of the facility felt fresh compared to the oppressive atmosphere of the tunnel. "That wasn't Frank," Dale panted, "but it knew things, personal things." "It's what they do," I said. "They get in your head somehow, learn what buttons to push." Dale leaned against a boiler, face ashen. "There's no way to the northern section. They control the tunnels." I thought of the emergency protocol document, still folded in my pocket. There has to be another way, some kind of override we can trigger remotely. A distant metallic groan echoed through the facility, the sound of something massive shifting position. The walls vibrated subtly, dust raining from ceiling pipes. Dale's expression hardened with sudden resolve. "There is one way, the roof. Northern section control room has a skylight access point, emergency protocol." "How do you know that?" Dale's gaze shifted away. "Frank told me once. If things went sideways, that was the contingency. It wasn't the whole truth, but we had no time for interrogations." The sun had reached its zenith. We had perhaps 4 hours until dusk, when the entities would return in full force. The race to reach the northern section before nightfall had begun. We made our way to the administrative wing, where a maintenance ladder provided roof access. Each step through the silent facility felt like moving through a mausoleum. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just an unnatural emptiness, as if everyone had simply evaporated mid-task. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to pulse with subtle movement, every reflective surface potentially concealing something waiting just on the other side. "I've been thinking about the rules," I said as we climbed the stairs to the top floor. "They're not arbitrary, are they? They're based on actual weaknesses these things have." Dale nodded grimly. "Frank figured that out years ago. Rule 3 about answering the phone. They can't mimic voices properly over electronic transmission. You can hear the differences. Rule 4 about names. They can only target you if you acknowledge them directly. And Rule 7 about the flashlight? That's what saved me last night. Light affects them differently when they first manifest. There's a vulnerability during transition between states." Dale paused at a landing, checking his watch. Each rule exploits a limitation in how they interact with our reality. The stairwell ended at a metal door marked "Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only." Dale produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it, revealing a short ladder leading to a roof hatch. "You first," he said. "I'll watch our backs." I climbed the rungs and pushed open the hatch, emerging onto the flat roof of the administration building. The bitter Dakota wind hit me immediately, stealing my breath. The temperature had dropped dramatically, dark clouds gathering on the western horizon. Snow was coming. Dale followed, securing the hatch behind us. "Looks like a storm front moving in," he observed. "That'll bring darkness sooner than we planned." The facility spread out before us, a complex maze of buildings, storage tanks, and pipelines. To the north stood the restricted section, its outdated infrastructure clearly distinguishable from the newer equipment surrounding it. A high fence topped with razor wire separated it from the main facility, with warning signs posted at regular intervals. "There," Dale pointed to a squat concrete building at the heart of the northern section. "That's the control center. See the skylight?" A dome of reinforced glass gleamed dully atop the bunker-like structure. Even from this distance, I could see it was designed to open, with hydraulic arms on either side. "That's at least 400 yards across open ground," I said. "Past the fence. How do we get there?" Dale gestured to a utility shed at the edge of the roof. "Maintenance uses a zip-line system for inspections and repairs. Runs from this building to several points in the facility. One terminates near the northern fence." Inside the shed, we found the equipment, a system of cables running to various points in the complex, with harnesses and pulleys for traversing them. One thick cable extended toward the northern section, disappearing into the distance. "You've done this before?" I asked, as Dale expertly checked the harnesses. He nodded. "Part of emergency response training. Not exactly OSHA approved, but it's faster than navigating through the buildings." He handed me a harness. "Put this on. Clip to the pulley, hold the brake handle, and let gravity do the work. Squeeze to slow down, especially at the end." I suited up, hands clumsy with cold and nerves. The clouds were moving faster now, the light taking on a strange yellowish quality that precedes heavy snow. We had 3 hours at most before darkness. "I'll go first," Dale said, attaching his harness to the cable. "Wait for my signal before you follow." Without hesitation, he launched himself off the edge of the building, the pulley whining as he zipped along the cable. I watched his form shrink with distance, heading toward a maintenance platform about 20 feet shy of the restricted fence. Minutes later, he waved, signaling the all clear. I took a deep breath, clipped my harness to the pulley, and stepped off the roof. The initial drop sent my stomach lurching before the cable tensed and I was gliding forward, the frozen ground blurring beneath me. The wind tore at my face, numbing my exposed skin. Halfway across, movement caught my eye. Figures emerging from between storage tanks below, their forms indistinct, but unmistakably wrong. They moved with that now familiar fluidity, like predators stalking prey. The entities had returned early, drawn by our presence or perhaps never having truly left. I squeezed the brake slightly, slowing my approach to the platform where Dale waited. As I neared, I noticed something odd about his posture. Too rigid, his head tilted at that unnatural angle. Not Dale. I released the brake, accelerating toward him. The not Dale's eyes widened in surprise as I crashed into him at full speed, knocking us both onto the platform. We tumbled in a tangle of limbs, the shotgun clattering across metal grating. I scrambled for the weapon, but not Dale was faster, its movements liquid smooth. Its hand closed around my ankle, skin cold as ice even through my boot. I kicked frantically, connecting with its face, which gave way like clay before reforming. "Dale Erickson never made it this far," it said, voice shifting between Dale's familiar drawl and something ancient and hollow. "He served his purpose, as will you." I finally reached the shotgun, spinning to face the creature. It had already recovered, standing over me with Dale's face stretched into that too-wide smile. "Where is he?" I demanded. "The real Dale." "Joining us. The transition is nearing completion." Not Dale's form rippled slightly, features becoming less distinct. He fought impressively. His memories are useful. I fired the shotgun, point blank. The blast tore through Not Dale's chest, creating a hole the size of my fist, through which I could see the platform grating. No blood, no organs, just emptiness. The hole closed slowly, darkness knitting together like living thread. "Physical weapons," it reminded me with Dale's voice. "We've had this conversation." I scrambled backward, keeping the shotgun aimed at the creature. My mind raced, searching for an option, a rule I could use against it. "You want the new rules?" I said suddenly. "I accept them." Not Dale paused, head tilting further. "You accept transition?" "I accept the rules. Show them to me. I'll sign whatever you want." I climbed to my feet slowly. "But I need to see them first. The complete text." The entity seemed to consider this, its form stabilizing as it processed my apparent surrender. "The complete text requires authorization from the northern section. You will accompany me." It was working. The thing wanted consent, needed it somehow. I could use that. "Yes," I agreed. "Take me there." Not Dale moved toward the ladder leading down from the platform. I followed at a distance, shotgun still raised. The sky had darkened considerably, the storm front moving faster than I'd anticipated. Snow flurries danced in the air, the first taste of the blizzard to come. At the base of the platform, a section of fence had been cut away, creating a passage to the restricted area. Not Dale passed through without hesitation. I followed, every instinct screaming that I was walking into a trap. The northern section felt different immediately, the air heavier, charged with static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. The outdated equipment was covered with a thin sheen of frost that sparkled unnaturally, as if tiny lights moved beneath the ice. Not Dale led me toward the central bunker with its glass dome. "The original breach point," it said, gesturing to the structure. "Where your kind first made contact with ours." "In 1956, I said. "During construction." "Your calendar means nothing. Time flows differently across the barrier." Not Dale stopped before the bunker's heavy door. "What you perceive as 69 years we experience as moments. The wound is fresh for us." The door opened without touch, swinging inward to reveal darkness broken only by blue-tinted emergency lighting. The interior resembled a Cold War command center. Banks of analog equipment, switchboards, and mechanical readouts. At the center stood a circular platform, directly beneath the glass dome. The control terminal, Not Dale indicated a console covered with switches and dials. "The containment protocol you seek to activate is there, but it will not function as you intend." I approached cautiously, one eye on the entity, the other scanning the equipment. The emergency protocol document listed a sequence of codes to be entered, but the console before me bore little resemblance to modern machinery. Its designs were archaic, labels faded with age. "Why show me this?" I asked. "If you know what I intend?" "Because choice must be informed to be valid." Not Dale remained by the door. "The containment protocol won't seal the breach. It will widen it, permanently." I studied the console, trying to match the instructions to the available controls. Why would Frank give me instructions that do the opposite of what's needed? "Frank Hellinger has not been fully human for 17 months, Not Dale said simply. "The transition has been gradual. His resistance, impressive. Parts of him still fight us." The realization hit like a physical blow. Frank had been compromised all along, feeding me false information, leading me exactly where they wanted me. Then, what actually seals the breach? I demanded. Not Dale gestured to the circular platform. Direct interface. A human consciousness, freely given, creates the barrier. That was the original containment method in 1956. 3 men sacrificed themselves to seal what they had opened. Davis, Chen, and Cooper, I whispered, remembering the journal. The team that entered the structure and never returned. They endure. Their consciousness maintains the barrier, but they weaken. The barrier thins. New sacrifice is required. Snow pattered against the glass dome, the storm arriving in earnest. Through the darkening sky, I could see blue light emanating from somewhere beneath the facility, pulsing upward through the earth itself. And if I refuse, then by dawn, the barrier fails completely. Our realities collapse into one another. The results would be catastrophic for both sides. The entity's form rippled, Dale's features melting away to reveal the same starlight-speckled darkness I'd encountered in the security office. It flowed across the bunker floor like living oil, surrounding the console but not touching me. Choose, Mark Halstead. Sacrifice to reseal the breach, or activate the false protocol and accelerate collapse. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. I studied the console, fingers hovering over the switches indicated in the emergency protocol. Frank's instructions, or what remained of the real Frank, had led me here for a reason, but not Dale claimed they would cause disaster. One of us was lying, or perhaps both were telling partial truths. The dome above cracked suddenly, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the glass as the pressure changed. Snow and wind whipped through the growing gaps. The blue light from below intensified, bathing the bunker in ethereal illumination. Time was running out. I had to make my choice. Through the broken dome, I could see other entities converging on the bunker. Dozens of them, their forms shifting between human shapes and something else entirely. The boundary between realities was thinning with each passing moment. I reached for the console and began entering the sequence, praying I was making the right choice. The Whispering Plains Petroleum Depot reopened 3 weeks after what official reports called a catastrophic systems failure. The local newspaper ran a small story on page 6, noting that 3 employees had perished in the incident: Frank Hellinger, Dale Erickson, and a new night security guard whose name wasn't released. I read the article from a hospital bed in Bismarck, where I had been recovering from severe hypothermia and trauma-induced delusions, according to my medical chart. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about dissociative episodes and psychotic breaks. The psychiatrists nodded sympathetically when I tried to explain what had really happened. No one believed me. No one except the men in dark suits who visited on my 3rd day. They asked detailed questions, recorded my answers, and left without introducing themselves. They returned my personal effects, minus my phone and the photographs I'd taken at the library. I was discharged after 2 weeks, with prescriptions for antipsychotics I never filled, and a severance check from an energy company I'd never heard of. The amount was substantial enough to suggest hush money, rather than standard compensation. I didn't return to Williston. Instead, I drove south, crossing state lines, putting as much distance as possible between myself and North Dakota. I paid cash for everything, avoiding security cameras and keeping to back roads. Paranoid behavior, the doctors would say. Necessary precautions, I knew. Sometimes I see them in crowds, people who move too smoothly, whose smiles stretch too wide. I catch reflections in store windows of familiar faces watching me. Frank, Dale, Jenkins, even Rachel, though I know she's still in Minneapolis. I've checked. I never told anyone what really happened in that control room, how I realized both Frank and the entity were manipulating me, how I found a third option, hidden within the conflicting instructions and half-truths. Not widening the breach, not sacrificing myself, but redirecting the energy flow, creating a feedback loop that neither sealed nor expanded the gateway, but stabilized it. The blue light had reached blinding intensity as I completed the sequence. The entities had swarmed the bunker, formless shadows converging on me from all sides. I remember cold pressure as they enveloped me, the sensation of falling endlessly, and then nothing until I woke in that hospital bed 2 days later. Whatever I did bought time, not a permanent solution. I know this with absolute certainty, though I couldn't explain how. Just as I know they're still searching for me. Last week, I found a handwritten note on my motel nightstand, a list of rules. Different from the ones at the depot, but unmistakably similar in purpose. Rules for surviving in a world where the boundaries between realities have grown thin. Rules for recognizing those who have been replaced. I follow them religiously. Don't stay in one place more than 3 nights. Don't form relationships. Don't use electronic payment systems. Don't look directly at anyone who calls your name unexpectedly. Sometimes I dream of the circular platform beneath the glass dome, of the 3 men who sacrificed themselves in 1956. In these dreams, they try to tell me something important, their voices distorted by the barrier between us. I wake with fragments of equations and symbols fading from my memory. The breach is widening again. I can feel it. The rules keep me safe for now, but they're bandages on a hemorrhaging wound. I've started visiting libraries, searching for patterns in historical records, scientific anomalies, missing persons cases. I'm looking for others who might have encountered the entities and survived. People who might help me understand what I experienced and what to do next. Because I know with absolute certainty that the incident at Whispering Plains was just the beginning. The entities are patient, they're adaptable, and they're learning our rules. God help us when they finally break them.